Jill, assistant professor in environmental science. I'm outside today recording some of my field methods to show you guys how I try to understand sort of the intersection of rocks and water and a little bit of forestry here in Appalachia. So today we're in the Fernow Experimental Forest in West Virginia. It's about a 3-hour drive south of our Eden Hall campus. I've been doing research in this forest for a long time. I started as an intern here in 2021. And then I did a postdoc here when I finished my PhD, and I'm continuing that research now that I'm at Chatham. And so we've had students, at least one student work out here during the summer so far. We're trying to get a second one this summer, and I use data that I collect out here in a lot of my classes. So what I'm interested in, let me read this stick, is how different underlying rock layers or different underlying geology affect groundwater and surface water. And then when we layer on top of that different forestry practices, how are we affecting surface water? And then layer on top of that, how is a changing climate affecting these interactions between rocks and groundwater and surface water? So what you're seeing right here is a groundwater well that we drilled almost 2 years ago. Wow, almost 2 years ago. And so this is about 9 or 10 feet deep into just the very top layer of surface water. If you look behind me, I don't know if you'll be able to see it, there's a really small creek, and this water just sort of starts seeping out of the hillside. We're on the top of a mountain right now and flows downstream for quite a long ways. And so we're sort of interested in what's going on in here, what's going on over there, and how are the two connected. So to understand what's going on in this groundwater, in here we have something called a pressure transducer. And this is wet, so there's water in our well right now. And this is recording every 15 minutes water temperature and pressure. And we use that to understand something about the height of water underground. And we also can then use that information to understand how we might be getting flow. Because downstream, way downstream of this creek, we have another well at the base of the mountain. So we can sort of compare the data from this here at the top of the mountain and the same thing at the bottom of the mountain and see if we see similar patterns. And so when groundwater temperature reflects surface temperature, you know, cold at night, warm in the day, cold at night, warm in the day, and then warm in the summer, cold in the winter, warm in the summer, cold in the winter, that means it's really affected by air temperature, which means the groundwater probably has not been underground very long. If we get a signature that's like a straight line all year, or a line with just a little bit of wiggles, that usually means that the water has been underground long enough to equilibrate with the temperature underground. The temperature underground in the first 1,000 feet or more is approximately constant at the average annual air temperature. So around here, that's about 53-ish degrees Fahrenheit. And so groundwater, if it's been underground a long time, will be about 53 degrees Fahrenheit all of the time. Same for temperature in caves. That's why you go in a cave underground and it's cold year-round, or at least cold. It feels cold in the summer and maybe warm if you go in the winter. And so we're pairing this data. Let me put this back. With air and water temperature along this creek. And we have several locations out here in the forest where we're doing this. We only have 4 wells. These are expensive. But to measure air and water temperature along this creek is very cheap. So we're doing that in 40 or more locations all throughout this forest. And I'll try to remember to insert a map into this video and show you where all those locations are. Because throughout this forest, it's been here since the 1930s and lots of research has happened. And it's been timbered in different ways, and different timber management practices have been applied. And that affects sort of what water does when you start to, remove trees or leave certain species of trees or add certain species back. And so we'll pause this here and we're gonna walk downstream and I'll show you how we're getting air and water along one of these creeks. So we walked upstream or downstream a little bit from where we just were at the well. Not very far, 50 yards if that, not far. And so we have some water flowing here from that same source, we think, that we had up by our well. And so we've had some trees fall down, but you see attached to a tree over here is a little white tube. And in that little white tube is a sensor that's recording air temperature in 15-minute increments. And down here in the water, buried, is another one of those, recording water temperature in increments every 15 minutes. And what we're looking for is something called lag. How long does it take peak water temperature to happen each day after peak air temperature. And that lag, combined with data that we get from groundwater, can tell us something about the interactions of groundwater, surface water, and air temperature. And we can collect that data, compare it to historical data, and see how maybe climate and changing weather conditions have affected these processes. We can compare it to data that other researchers are gathering about this forestry and compare to see how maybe those forestry management practices are changing water temperature or water rock interactions. We can also compare it to locations that we have on the other side of the forest. So the rock underneath us right now is like a sandy shale stone type of rock. It's very similar to the bedrock that's underneath our Eden Hall campus. This one's just a little bit older, but they're almost exactly the same type of rock. When we cross this forest and we cross the main creek in the forest, we get to a place where we have sort of stacked up layers of geology, layer cake geology. And so we have this sort of sandy shale stone, then a really definite sandstone, then a limestone. And that limestone is known for its ability to erode really quickly and open up really big conduits or tunnels underground. It's known for its ability to have really large springs. It's known for its ability to have caves. And so when you have that going on, you can get rapid transport of groundwater through that limestone. We sometimes say karst, through that karst system. And you can also have water that hangs out underground for a long time, which then is reflected in these different temperature signatures that we're getting in the surface water at those locations where they have that different type of rock underground. So that's what we're doing out here in the Fernow. We're trying to understand a lot of complex things about these intersections of geology and hydrology and hydrogeology and forestry. They even do soil moisture stuff out here. I'll try to get a few more clips for you guys today of some other stuff that goes on out here that helps support the data that I get and helps me make better interpretations. So we've come really far downstream from where we just were. So we were at the very top of this mountain called Fork Mountain. Probably should have said that earlier. Now we're at the bottom of Fork Mountain. And so all of the water coming off the mountain sort of converges. Here, there's another place where it comes off the mountain as well. And it all goes into a large creek called Elkwick Run. And so what you see here is something called a weir, and this one was constructed in 1992. There are approximately 10 of these throughout this whole experimental forest on the side of the forest with a consistent geology, and they started building these in the 50s. And what these measure is discharge from this V-notch. This is called a V-notch weir, and so there's equipment in this spring house that goes into this pool that is recorded, or it's recorded consistently and then downloaded once a week. And we can get an idea of discharge from this whole watershed on this mountainside, which accounts for maybe a third-ish of all of the water that flows off of Fork Mountain and into Elkwick Run. So we'll walk over here and get you guys a few clips so you can see what one of these looks like. So we've walked around to the back of the weir so you can see, and I'm going to put my finger in this screen. All of the water collects here in this pool and is slowed way, way down so that it can be measured as it flows over this V-notch. If we walk over here, down here is some piping with some equipment in it that measures pressure. Over on that side, you can see there's a tape measure to measure water level. We collect that data and get an idea for discharge every day. If we look upstream out of the box, you see this is just natural creek water that flows from there. And once a week, chemistry data is collected from this water, along with about 20 other locations throughout the forest. And that chemistry data, they measure pH, conductivity, alkalinity, major ions like calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium, nitrates, sulfates, and chlorides, and ammonia, and dissolved organic carbon. And all of that data tells us something about how plants are changing the chemistry of this water, how different forestry changes the chemistry of the water, because we see different chemistry in areas that have had different of these forestry management techniques applied, how rocks are interacting with this water from those major cations that usually come from the dissolution of rocks, And so I use all of the chemistry data collected by the people that work here to support all of that water level and temperature data I'm getting to develop this picture of these interactions of geology, surface water, hydrology, and forestry. Now, some of you know that me and Dr. Utes have a project that we're hoping to start this summer in the forest at Eden Hall. And there we're more interested in soil moisture, so water that's stored really near to the surface in the soil pores in invasive plants. But we're essentially trying to answer a similar question, right? How do these different types of plants affect what water is there and what that water is doing? And this is all sort of in this much bigger picture sense of understanding not only the interactions of these sort of different disciplines, but how different human activities like forestry or like changing climate or like our activities at Eden Hall affect these processes and affect the availability of these resources.